you start listening to country and western music? She got up from the chair, put her hands on her hip, and said, a change is as good as a rest. And I haven't been the same since. And when I go to church now, I sit in a different spot. You know how people go and sit in the same section all the time? So that's what she taught me. And that's the end of my story right now.
Imelda, as an advocacy organization for and about older Nova Scotians, I think your perspective or your interest is almost kind of out there, but what are your thoughts?
Well, for me, it's very important that we recognize that older people idolize senior. Because once you have the word senior, that's it. You were never anything else before that. So I really like to say older persons. But you know, there's a lot of older people in the community that are isolated as well because they fear the ageism and they just become more isolated. And so I'm very concerned about that. You know, we also have a lot of older adults looking after their loved ones and their caregivers in the community. And you know, you give a pat on the shoulder, great job. But that's an awesome responsibility for the head. And you know, we need to do good. And I'm really glad we're having this conversation. It's an uncomfortable conversation because it can make you uncomfortable, but we need to have this conversation around ageism.
And Amy touched on it earlier in the introduction. We are having this conversation because ageism does exist. And as you say, it is something we should talk about like the other isms. But the term ageism can really be off-putting to some people, not well understood. Can you share some examples of what ageism looks like? You want to start?
Well, that's a good one. Have you ever been diarrhea?
I beg your pardon?
I know, thank you. You know, or it's just that fact of you just are made to feel that you go someplace and you just made you feel that you're too old to do this. Well, it's interesting because I have the attitude of I'm just me. And so I just said, well, I'm just me. But lately, if you ask me my age, I don't know why. You know, because all of a sudden, certain qualifications, it's my age. And you feel it inside. It doesn't mean you feel it like this.
Yeah, I think that's a really great comment, and how we, I almost have the opposite effect, because I'll say, look, I'm 62, what is your problem? Because people will say, oh, you know, when you get to be over 60, I'm like, over 60, what are you talking about? I'm over 60.
Right.
And so I think sometimes we need to challenge people. We need to say, why, just as you were, why are you asking me that? Who cares how old I am? Unless it's to get, you know, OAS or something. We don't want to miss out on those things. But I do think age is so relative, and ageism isn't only older people. We are ageist against young people too. I mean, people follow young people around in the grocery store thinking they're gonna steal something. Like, that's also ageism, right? So I think calling out it as an ism, as a discrimination, I think is really important. In a nice way.
Linda?
I don't know what age.
I don't know what ageism looks like, but I got a funny feeling how it feels. And yeah, how it feels. And so I've come to the conclusion now. I've made a decision lately when people are curious about how old I am. See, I'm always wondering, what is it, why do you want to know? Is there something I'm doing that you think I shouldn't be doing at my age? Like, what's the problem? Like, where has it been written that I shouldn't be doing this now or something, you know? So when somebody says something like, oh, Linda, are you about 65? Are you around 65 or so? I said, yeah, something like that. And I leave it. Although the way off. But they don't need to know. What do they need to know for? What is it that they're trying to determine? But I'm so glad that I'm very, very much like my mother, because she really didn't really care. She had things to do, she did it. For example, when her and Dad were married, Dad wasn't into music, but she liked music. So if there was a band playing somewhere, and she's a married woman in her 40s and 50s and 60s, and she wanted to go to the club to see them, she'd get all dressed and go there and sit by herself and go watch the group. And don't care how it looked by anybody else. And I really like that about her, and I'm very much like her, I must say. And I'm so glad, because it gives me a sense of freedom. I don't think there's any books written, is there? Saying that I should be doing this, I should be doing that, or, oh dear heavens, you shouldn't be doing this anymore at this age, Linda. I don't think so. If there is, keep it to yourself.
Melissa?
Or what you should wear too, I think that's the other thing.
That's a big one. Yeah.
Melissa?
Great, yeah, I think this is so interesting, that it comes down to values and what we value on all those different levels of like the society's values, the individual relationships value. And another word that comes up, actually, just as we're talking about this, is paternalism too. Like in healthcare, there's quite a lot of paternalism that sneaks in and it informs what we offer to older people as options, how we engage, like I often meet people who say, I wish when I went to the doctor that they would talk to me and not my daughter, we need to engage people and see what they want and not just be listening to, somebody else that we think is speaking for them. And that also comes to different things like the opportunity to participate in research studies. If people want to, we should be trying to design our studies to optimally include the people that we actually need to be designing treatments for. So for example, the vaccine world that I do a lot of work in, if we exclude older people from the early stages of vaccine studies, even if they might want to participate and we have ways that we can allow them to participate, then how do we know that the vaccines that we're designing are going to work for older people? And you get all the way along the line before you start giving them to older people without having engaged in the research. So it's like the ageism can be seen if you look for it at every single step in the process, from developing treatments, medications, processes of care, all the way to implementing it.
Listen, given your expertise when it comes to dementia, are there specific ways that ageism is experienced differently for those who are living with dementia?
I really it's experiences what I've seen. And actually, one resource that I think is really important to think about, when getting back to that paternalism, is to allow and to support people to be as active as they want in their own lives, to self-operationalize however they want to be. The Alzheimer's Society of Canada has done really great work, and they have a charter of rights for people living with dementia that I'd encourage you to check out, because it really is a lot of us, nothing about us without us. It lays out a lot of practical steps about how we as a society and as healthcare and other institutions can better engage with people living with dementia.
I just want to jump in and say, in terms of paternalism, one of the worst, in my experience, is when adult children feel that they know best about what should happen. And I remember actually it was after church one day and someone came up to me, this is a number of years ago, and said, I really wanted to know my mom, I think I have to think about my mom and not, nursing home care and, and I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't realize your mom was not doing so well. And she's like, no, she's on a bus trip to Boston. But I need to know when I should put her in a nursing home. Oh, wow. I was just like, whoa, honey, you're not putting anybody anywhere. They're not an object. They're a person. That's your mother. You have a relationship. And don't get on me about parenting your parent. They are not your parent. those children of yours, and they'll always be your children. And so I just think it's really important that we have those kind of, as Donalda says, those awkward conversations with our children about, you know, who's driving the bus, really? Who is driving the bus here? And have the conversations before we may not be able to have the conversations cognitively. Not to say that's necessarily gonna happen, but let's get it in writing so they can't, you know, put us anywhere that we don't wanna go. That we don't.
Now, there are statistics about ageism, but people debate about just how accurate some of those figures are. In your experience on day-to-day work and personal lives, how prevalent do you think ageism actually is? I'm just hoping you know, because I know CART has done a survey which included a question about ageism, right?
Yeah, we did, as you know, with CART, the health, I went over the health of seniors, and mental, physical, emotional is very important. And so there was a survey done, and one of the questions in the survey, we sent that survey out to 10,000 people, members of CART. And the question was, have you ever at any time felt that ageism was a barrier to you receiving health care? We knew that this was an issue, but we really were taken back that almost 80% of the respondents, we got 1,400 back so far, we're still doing this survey, said yes, at some time or another, they have felt in the system that ageism impacted their health care.
Melissa, does that figure surprise you?
No, not at all, unfortunately, no. Our systems, you could actually think about this, so we have a population that's aging, which is a good thing, because it means we're doing well at lengthening lives and supporting people through the lifespan. But we do know that as people get to older ages, they have different healthcare needs, right? So they may have a number of different health conditions that have added up, and the treatment of each one of those needs to be done in the context of all the other things, right? So we can't design our healthcare system to deal really well with the one thing at a time, because, you know, people have 10 things at a time. But you could argue that because we continue to design our healthcare system for one thing at a time, that in itself is ageist. So, you know, every time you walk into the hospital, there it is, it's an ageist institution, but we need to try to unpack and ameliorate that.
As a reporter, I know one of the rules is always ask a question you know the answer to. And this question, I kind of figure I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are the perceptions of aging different based on sex or cultural background? Who wants to handle that one first? Donalda.
Donalda, you go for it.
Oh, 100%. Definitely. For example, when I asked you, you're gonna cook down here, you responded differently, like, you know, it's like, how dare you ask me a question? We are asked those questions all the time, and I think especially in workplaces, women are made to feel more inferior as they get older. You have to look a certain way, you have to wear your clothes a certain way, you have to make up a certain way, whereas, you know, men can just roll in sometimes.
We age gracefully, distinguished, that sort of, those kind of adjectives.
That's it.
Sure you do. In your own mind, David.
But yeah, it really is, it really impacts on how you feel about yourself culturally, and it doesn't matter if you're a female, it has an impact. So I think what we need to do is stop looking at, this is just me, stop looking at male, female culture, stop looking at all this stuff. What is the impact on the individual, regardless of who they are and where they come from? What's the impact of ageism on that person?
Janice, you're champing at the bit, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just think it's such an interesting question, just because of what you said. Like, I remember, yes, when I was a young person, younger, I will say, you know, I was told by someone that perhaps I should dye my hair because my son would, you know, on the playground, I might be misconstrued for his grandmother. And it's like, whoa, I'm in an aging program. How do you say that to me? So I like your point about, the stereotype that men are distinguished, women are, need to do the facelifts and the eye lifts and the whatever other lifts we need to do, to meet whatever we're supposed to look like. It is inherent, and I don't necessarily experience this, but I would suspect that when you combine ageism, it can get combined with other isms, right? So racism, homophobia, like all of these things can sort of intersect and collide to make it the experience at the individual level. I wonder would be even more difficult.
Linda?
I remember my father said to me one time, he said, "Girl, I can be all drunk up and laying in the gutter on Saturday night and get back up Sunday morning and go to church, and everybody will say, 'How you doing, Mr. Gordon? How you doing?' And he said, 'You try it and see how they'll respond to you.' And I knew exactly what that said a lot to me, and he knew exactly what he was talking about, the difference, And I said, wow.
Melissa?
Sure, yeah, very interesting question. So there is this intersectionality of all of people's identities and their social position, as they might call it, that would be experienced differently. So it's hard to say, even, looking at it as a binary, it would be much more complex than that. But certainly in aging medicine, you see how people age differently. So in general, like women would tend to live longer than men, but obviously not always. And it's much more complex than that, but then experience frailty differently and experience cognition and dementia differently too. And one thing that I guess we are doing better at in the research field is intentionally looking at that and examining it and making sure that more of our research is inclusive and looks at the experiences of people in different gender and sex groups.
And is there any attempt within the research to be culturally specific research, to be able to say, in indigenous communities, we talk a lot about elders,